Hi, thanks for being here. I'm Joan, and today we're going to be going over the three books that I read in January. Now, I know my video looks a little bit different. I got a new webcam and then I also got a new mic, so really hoping that this works out pretty good. Also, I know it's dark in here, but it's like raining outside and I really hate the overhead light, so we're still experimenting. Okay. And then also it just kind of feels really weird because I used to, at least before, I videoed on my phone and so I could kind of like see myself in there. Now I'm on my laptop, which is on the floor, so I'm like specifically looking at a camera, and so I'm sorry if things are a little weird this time. We're giving it a practice run, and I hope it goes okay. But anyway, getting started. So, the first book that I read in January, I technically started last year, but I finished it like in the early couple of days. And that was Restoration by Ave Barrera. And I'm not gonna lie, this book was really mid for me. A lot of it just kind of like went over my head, I think, because I just really wasn't vibing with like the diction of the translation, maybe. Like, the prose was pretty purple and it also felt a little meandery, and I really just could not get into the book at all, and I couldn't really immerse myself in it, if that makes sense. So I kind of had a hard time with that. And then also, I was kind of just bored too. I think also because I just was not getting it. So in this is about a woman who like fantasizes about like restoring an old home. And so she kind of latches herself to this man, and he lets her restore his family home. And the narrative goes between her point of view and then the point of view of, I believe, his aunt whenever she lived in the house originally. And like, this book is obviously about like domestic abuse and like how it's hard for women to get out of these situations and easy to kind of ignore weird or bad behavior. Okay, and so I think like one of the biggest reasons why I really just was not messing with this is because like, so the main narrator in the present time, she just she feels a little bit like plot convenient, which I know sounds silly, but like she literally latched on to this man who she did not know, who really seems to not really like her. And then she's still like building up the house and building up their future. And like this is a book about like the the abuse that women face. And so in the past point of view, we get, I think, is her partner's, and I'm going to use that really loosely, her partner's aunt who had lived in that house originally and had been like sexually assaulted by her husband's friend, with her husband being in on it. And like, I kind of get that it's showing like the two women in similar positions, but like the aunt, she couldn't get out of her situation because she was like a housewife in like before you could just get a divorce and before women were, able to do anything. But like in the present narrator's life, like it's just kind of her like blind ambition that keeps her in the relationship, because it always does feel like one-sided. Like she talks about how he leaves for weeks and says like nothing to her, and then just inserts himself back into her life, and she just goes along with it. And like when they first met, they got locked in this like photo dark room, and she literally physically latches onto him like it was just fucking weird. I just didn't get it. I just didn't understand. And honestly, really don't have much more to say about it, so I'm just gonna go ahead and move on. The next book that I read was Local Heavens by K.M. Fajardo. And this book literally took me forever to read because I think it was like 8 hours on my Kindle. And like sometimes when I start reading my books and they're that long, I'm like, oh, it's just learning my reading speed. It's gonna get shorter. Nope. This one stayed long. And some parts of it did feel really long, but I think overall I really did like it. Okay, and so Local Heavens is basically a cyberpunk retelling of The Great Gatsby. And I am going to admit something to you. I did not read The Great Gatsby in high school like I was supposed to. I did read the Cliff Notes. I understand. I know. I know. So sorry. This is not going to be a comparison to the original. Like, I know what happens in the original. I just have not physically read it with my eyes. So, this is like entirely just going to be this and not nuanced by the original. And so like on that note, this I really did enjoy this, and honestly, I probably am going to be reading the original to kind of compare it to. And I think it's going to be interesting reading the original after reading the retelling. The only thing that I like had a problem with was some parts of it really did feel like it dragged. Like I said, it was an 8 hour book, and like it felt like it. Like there were points where the plot really wasn't moving, and it was like focusing more on the characters, so I wasn't necessarily bored, but it also did just feel like physically took me a long time to get through it. And that was like mostly affecting the very like last 10% of the book. And I am not gonna lie, I've also not seen The Great Gatsby, but I did picture Leonardo DiCaprio as Gatsby like the whole book. In this book, we are still in the like narrative perspective of Nick. Okay, and so the way that I understood his job was that he like put his consciousness into like cyberspace and like protected data of a company he was part of against other people trying to breach that data or something. That's just how I understood it. And so in this, he is basically tasked with infiltrating Gansey's company to figure out what they're working on so that this company can kind of circumvent like their downfall or something. He also ends up getting like a surprise invitation from Gatsby himself, and this is because Gatsby wants to use Nick to get to Daisy. Duh. So I did really like the characters in here. I thought they were all written like very distinctly. I especially loved reading about Nick and Gansey's time together. The chemistry between those two is like thick, and the tension is thick. And like, I was a huge fan. I really loved the like easy, like unquestioned bisexuality. Like, I'm a slut for, commentary on homophobia and stuff like that. But it's also nice sometimes for it to just be like depicted and be normal. Like, I just also really enjoy that. And that was just done really well in here. And it's not like when he and Jordan are with each other that like they're like less entertaining, I guess. I equally loved his relationship between him and Jordan and then him and Gansey. And like because the book is so long, it does take a while and it is like a slower burn. And I just really enjoyed that. Now, something that I thought could have been a little better was I was kind of expecting more on like class differences because like the ultra uber wealthy and then there's like slums, right? And like that's kind of it. Like, it talks about, like, the ease at which Gansey can just buy anything, or like the luxury and extravagance of the uber wealthy. I don't feel like it really did anything with it other than use it kind of like as a backdrop, as a like, oh, look at this. Aren't they rich? Or aren't they poor? And like, there are excerpts of poor people attempting to get loans and how they're becoming like intergenerational loans because of how expensive things are. And think that was to do with like Gansey's work and how he makes his money. It just really didn't feel like a lot to me, especially with how long the book was. I'm about to go into like end of book spoilers, so if you don't want to hear about that, go ahead and skip to this time. But basically, when Gansey passes, he wills everything that he has to Nick. And so Nick is now grappling with the fact that this man that he loved has died, and now he has inherited this extravagant, like, life changing wealth, like generational changing wealth. And I really thought it would do more with that, I guess. And like, it's kind of disappointing because this is the part where I had like a hard time really focusing on the book because like the pacing felt really weird. And then I don't know, I think I had a hard time following it because I'm having a hard time even thinking about what really happens afterwards. Gansey absolutely haunts the narrative after he's gone. I don't know. I just kind of wished that Nick had delved more into how he handled becoming uberly rich and like the changes that that made to his life. And I don't know, it kind of like skips forward in time too. I don't know. I don't want to give like the whole thing away, but like with like the length of it, I honestly thought that that last section really could have been more concise or molded to do a little bit more. Okay, and so the last book that I read was Rejection by Tony Tulathimutte, and this is a short story collection of 5 stories based on figures that are rejected and how they deal with that. And so, like, the first one is called The Feminist, and that one focuses on a man who went to an all girls school and, like, learned about feminism and, like, implements it. He kind of is the guy who will use feminism as a way to gain access to women and make them comfortable around him, but he ends up being a guy that's never picked for a romantic relationship, which in his narrative, he does understand that, like, he can't make the woman feel bad for, like, rejecting him, but that in turn makes him feel upset because he can't be upset about it. And so it kind of uses, he kind of end up, like, turns the feminist ideals into, like, a red pill kind of thought process, like an incel. And it was really interesting watching him tumble that way. Like, he's asking, okay, so there is this like non binary character who used to present as female, and he literally keeps talking to them about like why women don't want him. And they keep telling him, they're like, I'm not a woman, but he keeps insisting on having these conversations, and he's like asking them if he's a creep, and it's like, if you're asking, then you are. The second one was honestly not my favorite, but it was like kind of hard to read, but not in the way that you're gonna think. It's hard to read in like a secondhand embarrassment kind of way. And so this one is about a woman who like has a one night stand with her friend and then has a whole relationship laid out for them. And he just wanted the one night stand, right? And so she has a hard time accepting this rejection and kind of turns into like an obsessive person, but also racist because of who he actually ends up with. And so it's kind of like a disaster watching what she's doing, and it's kind of hard to like understand why she's processing these scenarios like she is. But I've never really like thought of what it would actually be like to be these people and like process and think about things like they do. And so I did think that it was like pretty interesting and like it is really well crafted, and like every character feels very different from one another. The ending gets like really like meta. I just was not expecting that and it caught me off guard. And I really did like enjoy the ending that came out of that. I really liked that not every story in this was like rejection from a person. For example, we get actually two views of one of the characters, Kant. In his chapter, his is more like a rejection of the self. Like he feels such a shame for like what he's attracted to and what his fantasy is, that it is hard for him to like verbalize it and to actually have that with a real life partner. And I thought that was a really interesting take on rejection. And that chapter, like, actually made my jaw drop. So I'm not gonna go, like, really into detail. One of the other stories is like a rejection of identity, like, even identifying as like a human being. And I thought that was really interesting. And that's like where the meta comes in too. And it's kind of like exploring like what it would be like to feel like no one and nothing. And I just thought that was so cool. I just thought this whole book was cool. I really enjoyed reading it, even though I would be like terrified to pick it up and see what these people were doing. I get like secondhand embarrassment like really easily. So that was like times 100 in this one. Like in Kant's story, it goes into a full screenplay detail, pages and pages of what his actual fantasy is and what he feels so shameful about. And it's like, while I was reading it, I was thinking about like, am I supposed to wonder like why he thinks about these things, and like, am I supposed to laugh or am I supposed to feel bad about laughing if I do laugh? And then I'm probably thinking about it too much, but I I had a blast with this one, really. There's so many different things that you can think about and look at and analyze in this. Every story is so concise and so like fast paced. It felt like I like breezed through it. And so those are the three books that I read in January. And so this month I have finished one book so far. I've been kind of in a slump, but I read The Unworthy by Augustina Basterrica, the same writer that did Tender as the Flesh. I'm also currently reading Molka by Monica Kim. I got an arc of that, and that one's going pretty good. Um, and so I'm honestly should be finishing this one soon. And then afterwards, I am hoping either to start The Shards by Bret Easton Ellis or The Definitions by Matt Green, which I'm kind of leaning towards that one since I've been looking forward to that one for a while. Let me know what you think in the comments or if any of these sound interesting. As always, thank you for being here. I hope you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.